Hi, and welcome to this live reading from The Finder of the Lucky Devil by Mackie, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Prologue. The door shut heavily behind the prisoner, slamming in a way that had become very familiar to her over the past 6 months, or a lifetime ago. It was hard to tell anymore. In the same room with its bare white walls, gray round table, and 2 rounded chairs, the same horrible woman sitting on the other side of the table, smiling like she ate the cat that ate the canary. She sat upright, her hands folded on the table before her. She wore another perfect business suit, this one a dark green that complemented her blonde hair and matched the green-rimmed glasses sitting smartly on her nose. The prisoner was dressed in the same bright yellow jumpsuit she had worn every day that she had been in this place, her own brown hair hacked unstylishly short when she first arrived. She dreaded coming here, dreaded it with every step from the cell. It had been 2 weeks since she had seen the inside of this awful room and this awful woman with her cruel, smiling face. The prisoner guessed it had been too much to hope that her tormentor had finally forgotten her, that the torture and interrogations would be over. "Oh, you don't look happy to see me. I'm hurt," the well-dressed woman said, feigning a pout. The prisoner's face remained dispassionate as she took the seat opposite the woman, like the well-trained dog she was. The well-dressed woman looked at her expectantly, but the prisoner just laid her hands one on top of the other on the cold table surface and waited. There were no moves she could make that wouldn't end in her suffering, so she had learned to just stay still and to wait. They both waited for a response from the other. "I think you would miss me a little bit, seeing as I am your only friend in the world," the well-dressed woman pushed. The prisoner swallowed a dry lump in her throat. God, she hated this woman. "How are you, ma'am?" she asked, a voice sounding dry and creaky. "Oh dear, you sound parched. Here, have some of this," she said, and fetched a plastic bottle of liquid from the leather satchel next to her chair. The prisoner noticed how she avoided calling it what it was, like a bottle of water, and there was a horribly likely chance that it wasn't water at all, but some medicinal concoction or tasteless poison designed to make her suffer more or be more compliant. If she didn't take the bottle, it would be just as bad for her, though. She would be punished either way, and at that moment, she was just so thirsty. She took the bottle, cracked the seal, and downed the whole thing. It was room temperature, minerally, and delicious. While she guzzled her probably water, her interrogator busied herself setting out papers in a neat little stack in front of the prisoner, followed by 2 pens that she aligned perfectly with the top of the papers. The prisoner eyed the symmetry warily. "No need to look like that. This won't be too strenuous today. Just a little paperwork and then you'll be free to go." She uncapped one of the pens. It was the flowy quill type. "You mean this is it?" the prisoner asked, not really believing what the woman was saying. "Well, I can bring back the car battery if you like, but I think you'd rather just sign my papers. Am I right?" The well-dressed woman said as if she was trying to make a joke. The well-dressed woman was right, and the prisoner knew it. Bitch. She knew the prisoner would sign anything after so much training. The fact that she was pretty much broken at this point was evident even to her. The prisoner would say she was a monkey in elevator shoes if that was what her tormentor wanted. The prisoner didn't know why any of this was necessary and had stopped asking why a long time ago. She had told them everything she had known about her husband's embezzling, which had been pitifully little. She thought that would have been enough for them. It wasn't that bad as crimes go, and she hadn't been the one to do it. But even after she confessed, they kept asking more questions about things she had never heard of. And when they didn't like what she said, that was when they used pain. It had taken her 3 days of screaming about how she had rights, she needed a lawyer, and she was a person, for it to sink in that they didn't care, that those facts were irrelevant to them, that nobody was coming for her, nor was anyone looking for her, that she was going to die very soon and no one would know what had happened to her or to Justin, whatever they had done with him. The prisoner closed her eyes and tried to picture him again, his dark hair and wicked smile. the way his blue eyes twinkled and the way his hands felt on her waist when he pulled her close while he told her one of his great stories to her, his rapt audience. She went over each detail again. No matter what they did to her, she wouldn't let them take him from her. "Okay, here we go," her interrogator said, snapping her back to the present moment. She slid a single page across the table to the prisoner. "Sign this, please, attesting that you are alive and reasonably healthy." The prisoner picked up a pen and uncapped it, only to stare at the sharp quill. It was so pointy. How easy would it be to just stab her tormentor across the table with it? She had never been given anything before that came even close to a weapon. Was she deluding herself? She wasn't thinking she could escape, but maybe for just a moment she could get back at this person. Get a little of hers back. Make this bitch bleed like she had bled. Show her what it felt like for someone to hurt her without explanation or reason. Didn't she have a reason to want revenge? The best reason? "Hurry up, I don't have all day," the well-dressed woman snapped. Quickly, the prisoner complied, signing her name on the line at the bottom. Her hand seemed to know what it was doing, though she barely remembered her own name anymore. It had been something pretty, something she had loved once. Once the paper was marked, her interrogator took it, stamped it with a stamp, and then signed it herself. They repeated the sequence 5 more times. The prisoner didn't even listen to what her interrogator was saying about each page and what it was for. She just signed and signed. Finally, they got to the last little stack of pages that were stapled together. "Last but not least," the well-dressed woman declared, and slapped the papers in front of the prisoner, who blinked at the words scrawled across the top. "Dissolution of marriage?" The prisoner read the top aloud, and only then did the words make sense. The prisoner looked at her interrogator, feeling lost and numb. "I don't understand." The well-dressed woman did something surprising. She reached across the table and squeezed the prisoner's hand. "I'm sorry, dear." Somehow, her kindness hurt worse, as if the small bit of sympathy made what she was saying more real. The gentle touch was more painful than a slap. The prisoner wanted to shake her hand off, itched to do it, but didn't dare. Instead, she picked the pages up and looked at them closer. He already signed them? There in the first space of every set of 2 was his name, his signature, in terse, ugly, thin letters. Justin Masterson. Justin Masterson. Justin Masterson. She pushed the pages away from herself like they were poisoned. "No," she said, panic rising in her. Her throat closed and her hands shook. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be true. "This is a trick," she argued, though she wasn't sure who she was arguing with. "No, you stupid little bitch. This is very real," the well-dressed woman said, her voice becoming the cold, familiar one that the prisoner knew too well. "But I don't understand. Why is he doing this?" Suddenly, her interrogator slapped her hand on the table and the prisoner jumped reflexively. "You're whining again. I don't like it when you whine." "I'm sorry," the prisoner said meekly. Her hands were shaking even worse now. Her interrogator pulled the pages back towards herself and then tried to tidy them up in a big, exaggerated show of irritation. "And I think it would be obvious why this is happening. Your husband has accepted our offer, where you did not. Now he's going to be rid of you as soon as you sign those papers." The well-dressed woman was enjoying this. I want to see him," the prisoner requested, knowing it would be denied. She had asked every day to see her husband, her Justin. She had called for him, cried his name in pain and fear, clung on to the tiny shred of hope that he was somewhere in this place like her, and that maybe they would survive it. The idea that they were in this together kept her going like nothing else had. "I need to talk to him." "That's not going to happen, you pathetic idiot child. Sign the papers." It was an order, not a request. But I don't want a divorce." She did sound like a child, even to her own ears. "Sign the papers," the interrogator repeated, her voice going even colder, even quieter. The prisoner looked down at the papers again, and already her eyes were filling up with tears. On her left ring finger was her wedding band. She had never really understood why they let her keep it. It was just a plain band, no jewels or anything, just gold and white gold running around through the middle. She had twisted it 1,000,000 times on her finger until it had left a red dent in her flesh, her last link to her Justin. She could barely see it now through her tears. She could feel them trickle down her face, but she didn't bother to wipe them away. She let her grief flow free as she realized he had abandoned her like she feared he would. She signed one line after another until the divorce papers were completed. Truthfully, I'm not sure what he saw in you to begin with, the interrogator started to say as soon as the prisoner started signing. It'll be a relief, I'm sure, to be rid of a worthless piece of garbage like you. She said it so matter-of-factly, no malice or hate really, just as if it was a simple, undeniable fact. The minute the prisoner's last signature was in place, the well-dressed woman ripped the page out from under her pen and stowed it with the rest in the satchel. Then she stood, plucked the prisoner's pen from her weak hands, and slung the whole thing over her shoulder. Goodbye. I never did find out what that secret you keep is, but I am very glad to say I will never see you again, she declared, and smiled one last time. Then she went to the door and exited just as 2 burly men entered. The hairs on the back of the prisoner's arms rose as she realized the implications of what her tormentor, her former tormentor, had just said. Free to go. That they would never see each other again. The prisoner realized that these men were here to kill her. So the prisoner fought. It was a surprise to herself, really, that she still had any shred of will left to fight. She had thought she had lost the desire to fight, but the minute the first meaty hand wrapped itself around her wrist, something snapped inside her. She screamed at the top of her lungs, though to her own ears it sounded so far away, like it was someone else that was screaming. She kicked and clawed and bucked. She was completely senseless that she might be hurting herself as she struggled. It took both of the burly men, one trying to bear hug her and the other wrangling her legs to get her out of the door. Once in the hall, they managed to carry her down a short distance before one of her feet got free and she kicked off the ground, breaking the partial hold on her upper body. "Goddamn bitch," one of the men yelled and swung back to slap her across the face, but the blow didn't connect. She had scrambled up out of his range and was trying to run, but her feet were caught by hands again. A second hand caught her skull by the hair, and that was how they hauled her the rest of the way down the hall through clinical double doors. The moment they passed those doors, it was as if some unspoken goal that she had decided was the point of no return. That was when she gave up. She couldn't see where they were going anymore. "Unhand her," a voice with eerie power snapped. Or rather, there was a snap, something crackling through the air. The burly men dropped her, each of them arching their backs as they writhed in pain. Softly, the young woman floated like a feather to the ground as they both fell hard. It seemed like the men were flung back through the doors they had just entered. She laid on the cold tile floor, collapsed onto her knees, breathing hard, her face covered in sweat from fighting. She stayed that way for an eternity, but no one touched her. No one was touching her. That was strange. Why wasn't she being hauled to her feet and strapped into some horror device out of a dark nightmare? Anna? She looked up startled at the sound of the gentle voice. The gentle, familiar voice. She was in a visitor's room, at least that was what she would call it. There was a sofa and a side table and 2 armchairs with a painting of landscapes, and in the middle of the room, looking down at her, was a small old woman. Her features were soft. In fact, everything about her was soft, from her pink sweater to the curl of her snowy white hair, to her hand reaching out to Anna, palm open in invitation. Anna remembered those eyes, blue and clear as the sky, and her wrinkled face that smiled even when she did not. Anna knew her. She knew her. Aunt Maddie? Anna dared to ask, dared to hope. "Yes, darling Anna, I'm here. I've come for you," Aunt Maddie said, tears standing out in her eyes. The younger woman started crying as she was wrapped into the older woman's arms. Aunt Mattie was here. Anna breathed in the scent of cinnamon, cream, and old lady. They rocked for a long time till the younger woman's tears stopped. Then Aunt Mattie brushed invisible hair away from Anna's face and looked at the younger woman with so much love. My poor, sweet little Rune girl. Let's go home. I swear by every ounce of magic in me, no one will ever hurt you again.